Welcome to Emotional Sobriety. On social media, I called it doing some reshuffling, and there's been there's been just some life showing up, life making demands we weren't expecting, and we're trying to roll with the punches here on the show. And we hope that you'll forgive our brief absence. But in any case, we're grateful to be here with you now. I'm joined by Tom Rutledge, Alan Berger, and Joe Chisholm. And
shuffling sound effects. I don't know if that comes through. I don't know.
That sounds real good. Yeah. I put a cat down last week. It was my favorite of the fur babies, and it's funny. The cats have been kind of like a very like a side character, like one of the minor side characters of Emotional Sobriety. I do a lot of complaining about how they're ungovernable and they mess with my sense of control and type A obsessiveness over my environmental circumstances. But Mouse was just such a lovely, pure soul, and I really got close to her because she had some kind of chronic health conditions and there was a little bit of a slow decline, but then at the end it got very violent, and I hesitate to use the T word, but it was her death was traumatic. And I just, that was an instance where, first of all, I was grateful to be there for it. I was grateful to be able to be in the room when we were, putting her down, and then also to be with Maddie, who's her real cat parent. She'd gotten Mouse before I met her and our relationship began, but I was glad we got to be there together for that. And I think I'm very unreasonably uncomfortable about crying, but the tears were flowing freely that day, and I felt very raw and close to the surface. And I suppose it just kind of got me into an open and vulnerable place that, and as far where that intersects with my emotional sobriety, I don't know. I know that I'm grateful to be in a place of physical sobriety and in touchness with with recovery and with people like you guys. I was on the phone with Tom the day that I was racing home to basically just take Mouse to the vet and put her down, and that was a tremendous help to me. Tom told me that pets teach us how to die in a way, or they kind of and I thought that was very poignant and profound. And that's about all I have to offer, at least at the outset, just as far as like that experience really kind of, I guess, put me into touch with where I'm really at emotionally, and in terms of how to grapple with these jagged edges and unexpected turns of fate that happen in my recovery. So that's me.
Well, Patrick, at the risk of having talked to you during that time, it's at the risk of taking your inventory here, which will take a little few points off my emotional sobriety check-in. But I want to tell you, it's like it's. I think it's a lot about what we're talking about today about our about emotional sobriety is sanity. And sanity to me is about congruence, and it's like if you're in there with Mouse and with Maddie and Mouse is dying, having to go. It's like, and your tears are flowing down your face. That's about as emotionally sober as you can be, because that's that. And this is just a side note is when I used to do a lot of groups, and and I can tell you this, and I think this is absolutely the truth. There was no time in any of the groups I did through decades of work that was guaranteed that everybody in the group would cry, would at least leak a little, was when somebody came in because their pet had died. It was like it touched everybody. These guys are teachers for us, and it's beautiful. And you're a beautiful parent, kitty dad.
Thank you so much, Tom. How's emotional sobriety hitting you today?
I'm doing good. It's like I'm going back. I'm several part of my shuffle is I've been dealing with some regression in my depression, my relapsing in my depression. Just I'm feeling bad, and I'm doing some new things with my psychologist to deal with that. But it's one of the places I would say is good for me, and I share this with clients sometimes is once I've come to understand the depression I've had for a long, long time and I can understand it, and I cannot take it personally, when I can learn not to take it personally and deal with it as a pain condition, and so that it really does help me filter out all those should messages and those critical, condemning messages that come in, because those saboteurs in our heads that condemn us, they're just little opportunists. They see anything, they love to kick a man when they're down. And if they see us down, they come in and start blaming us. And it's like, I'm very grateful through this process, although, it sucks to be going through some of it, but it's like, I'm okay. I understand what it is. And it's a matter of getting tweaked on the treatment. So I'm feeling good. And probably, if you ask my wife, she would tell you a different story.
When we were getting ready for this show, by the way, it is great to be back. I love listening to this show. It is a podcast. It's not a broadcast. There is no schedule or deadline to meet. These are things that we place on ourselves. Oh, we got to get it out. It's got to be weekly, or it's got to be this length of time, or something like that. And there's a fluidness with podcasting. Which means, when you got something really good to say it. And if you don't, let it slide sometimes. Some people love to work on a schedule. I like the fluidity of this versus radio. That's for sure.
Well, you saying that, it's just what I needed to hear, because it puts me in check with the voice in my head that's just been like, there's an imperative that we, get this out as frequently as possible. But you know what? Like, this is a point, I think, in all of our lives where we need to take a breath. And I think something about just hearing you say that just now really put me at rest as far as the pace that this is needing to be unfolding. Yeah. And I think it's for the best. I'm stoked.
Good. I took a spot check inventory when you mentioned in the email we were all going to check in with how our emotional sobriety was. And I thought, well, I'm a little anxious about this and I'm a little uncomfortable about that. And I was trying to, talk myself out of it to be ready for the show. And, when you're talking about sadness or depression, what you're dealing with right now, and we talked about this a little bit before the show started, happiness isn't the goal for me in emotional sobriety. It's being, as to steal Tom's words, congruent. So early in Allen's book, he talked about waking up from sleepwalking. And once I've done that, I don't want to go back there. I want to feel the hurt I feel. I want to be present to my life. I want to feel the sadness. I want to feel the anxiety. Because otherwise I'm missing out on life trying to avoid it all. I was recently researching about, writing about, call it harm reduction. That sort of space between stimulus and response, right? Like holding a space between someone cutting you off and, are you going to slam on the brake or the horn or the gas pedal, right? Just have some space between those two things, because that's what emotional sobriety allows for, right? Making a measured response. And it doesn't mean I always have to be balanced. One of the great things I heard from Tom was about, we live in a range. I always think about, I've got to keep in balance, a little bit of order, a little bit of spontaneity, that perfect, in the middle of the, but you have this whole range you can live in. I have this whole range I can live in, and I can wander over to the edge. Yes, it's more dangerous there. It's also more exciting there. And I've got to, not be afraid of living my life, because I have this recovery from addiction I have to protect, or I have this emotional sobriety that I want to keep in some sort of perfect balance. I've got to be out there. And because my greatest turning points in life have been emotional turning points. times where I've had to face loss, and I've had to look at myself and how things weren't going to go the way I wanted them to. And I love that part of life, not when I'm in it.
Right.
And the best thing is can I, just sort of be with it and remember, this too shall pass. This is reality. I am dealing with life on life's terms. And I've got things with my home group and things with my car, which is going to need to be replaced. And my dad's 86 and his partner just turned 84. I'm sort of helping them with sort of transitioning from totally independent living to, their next stage. And that is, that triggers everybody's, immortality terror, right? Things are moving along. So yeah. And I'm sad for people who don't have something like this where we do check in with each other, where people who are out there listening go to their home group. In relapse prevention, one of the things they say is, if you're thinking of drinking, go to a meeting and say that. Don't say, oh, it'd be inappropriate or something, right? It's important to let it out, because sometimes that will right size it as opposed to let it get bigger and bigger. And sometimes you're going to help somebody. Sometimes you're going to hear something, but you gotta light the match to get the fire.
Isolation is the most dangerous thing, and that's it. I always tell people recovery is based on tattling. We just keep tattling on ourselves.
Allen, how are you, my friend?
Well, I'm sitting here. I'm on that other side of what Joe is saying. I'm in that part of, I hate what's going on right now. It's really I'm in a tough spot. My life has been turned upside down, you guys. Jess filed and served me with divorce papers. Total shock to me. Didn't see it coming. So, now it's kind of, God, when that first happened, that first night, man, I went into such a dark place. So dark, man. The darkness was just enveloping me. I was talking to Tom about it, and I just could not see anything other than, why go on living? I was that despondent and discouraged and disappointed and devastated. I mean, those are the words that just come up for me. And that night, I was suicidal. I mean, I really was. I mean, it was, thank God that Cece was in bed with me. That's all I can say. I turned over in the middle of planning to go downstairs and get my 9mm Sig Sauer and blow my brains out. I turned over and I saw Cece, and I just said, I cannot leave that legacy to this little girl. Just can't do that. It would be too fucking selfish. So, here we go. Let's get ready for this ride, whatever that's going to be. And, and then I started reaching out to people, and, I shared the other night in the meeting, Tom, what it meant to me when you said, hey, Al, you're just walking down this corridor that's so dark, and you don't know that there's a right angle somewhere in the future, but if you can just hear my voice and keep walking towards my voice, you'll eventually find that right angle and be able to turn.
Even then I can see your light. You can't see it at that time. It's like just, and if the reverse were the case, it would be, you get it.
I see it a little more now, thank God, but God, you guys, I have just been filled with sorrow and grief and anxiety. It's better today than it's been, earlier on. I use the image that I felt like I was in a tsunami, that the waves I just could not get a break, right? I was just flooded with these emotions and pain and anxiety. And now I actually have periods of time where I'm peaceful and quiet inside, and I feel okay, but they're bookended, right? I mean, those are periods. And then I have other periods of time where I'm just, crying and sad and anxious.
Yeah,
about-
when you come up, when you feel the hair, you take a deep breath because you're going back down under again. So
Right,
it's
I'm
like
going back
you
down
understand
under
that. It's like,
and
yeah.
that's it's just the incredible fracture, maybe the way to call it, to my life. Just the way this all went down is I was, I trusted Jess, mostly. I'll share with some of the things I'm getting in touch with now,
Mhm.
but I didn't feel safe at home anymore.
Mhm.
That was terrible, man. Is to be up in my room. Well, I slept upstairs a lot of times. We haven't been sleeping in the same bed for a long time, but I was upstairs in my room, and I used to, feel sad about that. But now I felt scared being in that house. And that was a really funky feeling. That brought me back to some earlier experiences. I was going to read to you guys because I've been obviously doing a lot of writing.
Yeah.
I've here with my sponsor, Tom, and look, to Jess's credit, and she's doing what she has to do. And the less I take that personally, the more I can see her and that she's on her journey, and even have compassion and empathy for her. I feel for her and what she's going through. This is a big step in her life, a huge step that she's following. And it's not easy for her in any way. So there's moments when I have that, you know what I mean? I feel that compassion towards her, but I'm also feeling more of a compassion towards myself. I realize that in so many ways, I leave myself out of my life. And my God, I couldn't see that clearly before. I just wanted to read you guys. I'm reading Destination Joy by Ernie Larson.
Oh, Ernie Larson.
I love his stuff. This was one of his later books. It was after stage 2 recovery and stage 2 relationships. He wrote this book. And it's about moving beyond fear, loss, and trauma in recovery. How timely. Guess who gave me the book, Tom? Herb Kagan.
All right. Of course he did.
Thanks, Herb.
And Herb says, "Hey, Al, I got a gift for you." And it's really perfect for me. But Ernie is saying, he's talking about, what happens, my God, here we go. We even those of us that are in the program for a long time, he goes, a character defect is sneaky. It may lie dormant for a while, which is to this thing. I've always thought of myself, Joe, as a very awake guy.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm asleep in some areas still.
Yeah.
It's funny how you can be awake in parts of your life and still asleep in other parts of your life. My goodness. I thought it was more black or white, right? I thought it was more, a digital thing. You're either on or off, but it's not like that. It's a dimmer switch.
No way.
In some areas. In this area, in terms of what happened in my relationship with Jess, I was asleep, man. I was asleep. So he goes, character defect may lie dormant for a while. Then for reasons we may not understand, in this case, I understand them very much so, the trigger suddenly gets pulled and we light up. He goes, maybe the pain is new. Maybe it was buried so deep, we forgot it was there. That's what happened to me. I forgot it was there. Like a bone chip working its way up after a calamitous accident, it breaks the surface and then feels like it is gonna kill us.
Read that again, just for the sake of the metaphor. I want to hear that again. That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't it? He goes, a character defect is sneaky. It may lie dormant for a while. Then for reasons we may not understand, the trigger suddenly gets pulled and we light up. Maybe the pain is new. In my case, it's not. Maybe it was buried so deep, we forgot it was there. But like a bone chip working its way up after a calamitous accident, it breaks the surface and feels like it is going to kill us. My God, that's what I experienced. And he goes, what is happening? Why now? What is going on with me? But the abiding question is always, am I willing to pay the new price to whatever is digging its bloody spurs into my tender flesh?
Wow. That's somebody who's experienced what he's writing about. You can't write that if you haven't experienced it.
Then he goes on, if so, then how do I go forward? What do I need to do? He says, the road leading through this stage of your journey lies in your map of recovery. And we have a map. We have a map of emotional sobriety now. Thank God for that. Listen to this. Since the world is not perfect, and we surely aren't, there is never a time when we can't move further up the hill. A good friend of mine says, Alan, you have to imagine Sisyphus smiling as he's pushing that boulder up.
Yeah.
You have to imagine a big smile. And I think maybe Herman Hesse was the first one who said that, but you got to imagine. Well, I don't have that fucking smile on my face, you guys, yet.
Yeah, not yet.
I hope to get it back. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't have it now.
No. Maybe now's not the time for it.
No, it's not. He goes, progress, not perfection, has been a saving light for many of us. He said, hitting this new wall is pretty good proof that God must not be finished with us yet. For whatever reason, and what I think of God, I replace that with my life is not finished yet, right? I'm still incomplete. I'm still, a work in progress kind of a thing, to a point where something has to be done. But then he goes on to say, it doesn't matter whether the pain of some unrecognized, unchallenged defect has come to us with a pounce or a crawl. When it comes to us, we must know we must do something about it. Hitting this new wall is not a step backward in recovery. God, people, please hear that. And I got to hear that. I got to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a step backwards. He says, it is our, and this is what I was trying to get to. And I just think all of that was important to understand this. He says, it is our spirit, our soul, and our spiritual center asking us to go further. Trouble doesn't mean something's wrong, right? I mean, it's something's right. And that reminded me of that. It is our
right. It's just saying this is what's happening. That's right. Exactly.
And that is happening for a reason. Listen, the stuff that's coming up for me, as you guys, as I was talking to you about, this has brought me back to the trauma I had when I was 11.
Yeah.
When my dad died. When he died, when my mom walked in the room and said, your daddy died last night. First of all, my fucking world got turned upside down, just like the day Jess said, you're going to be served papers tomorrow for this divorce. I was that little boy standing in that window again. And the same thing happened. My mom walked out of the room. She was in so much pain. She didn't have anything to comfort me. And that goes to her history. And I've done some work on that. But the same thing happened here. Jess says it and she walks away. And I'm sitting there so alone again. And then when I started, I had this 3-hour EMDR session last Thursday that just was so friggin' helpful. I mean, I think it's largely responsible for me having these periods of peace and quiet at times. But I started to see how much, when I got abandoned, how much I abandoned myself. How I did the same thing to myself. And here I thought, look at me, man, I'm really got myself together. I'm advocating on my behalf. But there are many ways that I don't. And I'm really coming to realize this, is that I am, my sponsor, Tom, says, Al, look, you spend your whole life giving everybody what you wish somebody would give to you is love and understanding and support. And he says, everybody feels it. Everybody that talks to you, everybody that interacts with you feels that in the presence of you. But you don't give it to yourself much at all. You really don't. So look, that's the journey I'm on, you guys. I'm in the middle of hell right now. I get little patches of sunlight coming through. And I'm putting one foot in front of the other and trying to, and this is the other hard thing is, man, trying not to get too far ahead of this whole thing. Is trying to just stay with right now and not figure out my whole life in the next 5 seconds. That's what I want to do. I'm looking for some kind of certainty, and right now there isn't any.
Well, let me say this. One of the things that, that I thought about when Joe was talking is, when he says, I want to feel this pain. It isn't because we want to feel pain. It's like, that's no, nobody's saying that, but we want to experience our life as it is. We want to experience life fully. And that's what you're saying right now, Alan, is it's like, it's, I mean, there's all places all through you that says, run, hide, shut it down, dissociate, do any those
Somebody come and rescue me.
defenses.
Somebody please come and rescue me.
Yeah. Somebody,
Oh,
it's like, but the idea of going to, I mean, to me, I'm glad you have the Ernie Larson book. The book of Pema Chodron I just finished reading was one she wrote in the 90s. It's called When Things Fall Apart. Might not be a bad one for you to pick up. It's like, but it's her that Buddhist approach of just, and it goes right to what we're talking about with Nathaniel Brandon on the Thursday night meeting. What Roger Andes talks about. It's always about acceptance. This is what is. I want to experience it. And when we're living, what I tell myself and tell my clients, it's like we got to pan back to the bigger picture. Because that way we can understand, okay, no, there, like you said, there is reasons for this. There are purposes. There are lessons here that I'm going to learn. There are things I'm going to gain. I'm going to grow. And that's going to be there for me and for others who are close to me, others who follow me, others who, it's all part of the growth process for all of us. And you know it in your head, but I understand your heart's still saying, fuck no.
I do.
Yeah.
Alan is the person most closely working with me in recovery. And I met him before my physical sobriety date and was convinced I was ready to get this ball rolling, and was convinced to do an inpatient program, and from there, the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think what led me to substances in my teenage years was that the hope of that rescue of let me avoid the consequences of moving through life and not being affirmed, not getting the things I want, just in my formative period as a person, just not wanting to walk across certain bridges or feeling like so much fear that I couldn't. And what remains true today about emotional sobriety for me, and the work that I have done with Alan and continue to do, is that it's not about rescue from those consequences or avoiding the pain. It's about how to move through it in a more present way, in a more compassionate way, which includes self-compassion, and to just be the best person that I can be, and to not just show up for myself, show up for others. But we're not selling the rescue from the bad shit from happening. It's going to happen, but there's immense value, and it kind of redeems, I think, the pain to be able to move through it while not diminishing the most important parts of ourselves, the best parts of ourselves.
One of the insights that I'm getting from this thing is, and I haven't seen this so clearly before, is when I was doing this EMDR session. First of all, I used to be a bit skeptical about EMDR, right? I thought it was a little bit kind of airy-fairy. Man,
woo-woo.
Talk about contempt prior to investigation.
Yeah.
I will never say that.
Well,
about
skeptical, not cynical.
Yeah.
So, open-minded skepticism.
I maybe
is the way to
bordered on
approach it.
cynical at times.
Okay.
I just think, but mostly skeptical. But look, the research is saying that this really works for people, and I know it really worked for me. But one of the things they do is that in the beginning, Dr. Burke, who was working with me on this, they find what they call entry points into the trauma. And then you use these entry points into the trauma as you're doing watching these lights move and feeling the different vibrations in the paddle that's on your knees and hands. And one of the entry points that got me to be aware of is this idea that if it's my fault, I could have controlled it. I've been doing so much of that with this whole thing with Jess, like taking responsibility for how she's feeling, right? And what she's doing, like it's my fault. But the idea of it, what I realized in this thing is that when I did that when I was 11, that if I was more worthy, more lovable, then my mom wouldn't have walked out of the room on me. You see what I did? It's like I tried to create certainty from an experience of powerlessness. And it was so interesting how now I realize that when I take things personally, sometimes the function behind that is to try to control the situation. If I take it personally, then there's something I can do about what's going on.
It gives you, it's a way of giving ourselves a sense of hope. If I did it, then I can undo it.
It's false hope. It's false
Right. Well,
hope.
yeah, absolutely. But that's
myself.
where we can forgive ourselves for the defense because that's one of the things I always love to find for myself and show for others is when you look at your defense that you've been, layering another heap of condemnation on top of that, our defenses always make sense. If we go in there and find it, we look at it, we go, it's like, that's why we do that. Oh, that's why I did it. And
because if I didn't feel like somehow, I think that was the only way I could create a sense of personal agency, that somehow I could show up in this world and not let the world just suck me, totally pull me under, right? Totally get flushed down the drain. If this was my way of holding on to the side of the toilet bowl, so to speak, right? Just gripping it, right? If I blame myself, if I take responsibility. So what I saw in this, you guys, is that a lot of things I do or I did in my marriage were try to convince her to love me. Instead of inspiring her love, I was trying to manipulate it and demand it in all of these other ways. And it came from this insecurity with myself. It's like, my God, was that a revelation in terms of it? And so I would get totally lost in trying to please her and now be completely dependent on how she was reacting and behaving. What a situation I created for myself. And so I got further and further lost in the marriage. And we're seeing a couples counselor together. We're going to continue to do that even though we're getting divorced. He's the president of the Gestalt Institute in New York. He was trained by Fritz Perls, Tom.
Wow.
Fritz Perls trained this guy. And I've had 4 sessions with him and they've been unbelievably helpful.
That's great.
But one of the things he said is that when you guys get caught in this situation where, and this is how he described it, and I think it's really a great image. He says, when you get together with someone and you fall in love, it's all about the you. I want to make you happy. I see you. I want to just revel every moment with you. And he says, and then after you get married, you have all these hopes and dreams that that's going to somehow just magically continue on. And then all of a sudden, the disillusionment hits. You become disappointed in the other person, in the relationship, and what's going on. And he says, one of the things that we don't do well in our society is to deal with disappointment and failure.
No shit.
We want to accept it. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to feel it. Everything we've been talking about. At that point in time, when you don't deal with that disappointment, then you fall into what he called the protective eye. And now you start, like you saying, Tom, you defend yourself. You're protecting yourself. It's no longer about the you. And so the we that the you created starts to fall apart. It disintegrates. It deconstructs. And now it's just about 2 individuals, fighting for their survival, right? For their I. He says, at that moment, then he says, and I love how he said this, he says, then all the ghosts in your attic start to rattle their chains.
Perfect.
They start rattling their chains. And now what happens is you project onto the other person all of your unfinished business and all of your incomplete trauma, unresolved trauma. And he says, now that does the final coup de grace to destroying the we, because you get polarized. He's a monster, you're a monster, you're this, you're that, and the relationship gets completely fragmented. He says the biggest mistake people try to do is they try to save that marriage. And I've said this to a lot of couples, maybe you have too, Tom, is
I have.
my first marriage is over. I don't know if Jess and I'll ever have a second one. We may or may not, but that one needs to be buried. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No,
Now,
what I say to clients sometimes is after they tell me what's going on and we're in that place. And by the way, I love that you guys are going to counseling, especially when there are kids involved. There's no better time for people to go to couples to go to counseling. It's a beautiful thing. But I tell people like because I always say we have to find points of agreement to begin couples therapy. And I said one of the points of agreement very often is neither of us want this marriage. You know, we might want to be married, but we neither of us want this marriage, and people can get their head around that part. They can go like, we're not trying to save this.
Now I'm no longer bitter about what she's doing. I didn't like how she did it, but that's on her. That's not on me. I didn't make her do that. That's just who she is. I'm not taking that personally anymore. I'm in total agreement that we need to take this step, and I'm totally support her decision. That she wants this thing to get off the merry-go-round. I do too. I'd get off in a different way, but if this is the way she needs to get off, I can support that. I'm all for that because I don't want to stay in the marriage that we had. I was unhappy and lonely, just like she was. That's where we were on the same page, and where we are on the same page, and we're on the same page with kids.
Yeah, that's the point of agreement. Yeah,
we love Cece and Maddie, and we're going to do the best we can to deal with that. So, wow, that's my update.
Well, can I share something?
Please.
You know, and I'll just talk about my personal experience about this because it's the only one I have the right to talk about. But during the pandemic, I went through the breakdown or reorganizing of a relationship too, because nothing is ending. Something is transitioning, right? Something I read recently, I'm not a human being, I'm not a human doing, I'm becoming. I'm a human becoming, I'm in transition. And that's true if I live a life of solitude by myself. But when I add it to another person, that's two people going through the same things. And one of the interesting things about this happening sort of through the pandemic, we were living separate and apart in the same place. And we were able to go through a lot of these sort of stages where we each had our own space. And also, the things we still enjoyed together, long walks and talking. And we went from this, you're not hearing me, to how could you possibly hear me, right? How can I possibly know her? How can she possibly know me? Because it's my programming and my conditioning that I'm seeing her through, not through her programming and her conditioning. And there is the great shame about communication is we think it happened. And, it's funny now, times we were driving, we're both quiet in the car, and I'm so happy because we're both on the same page and enjoying, and she is just going crazy, right? My experience is this is the most peaceful, wonderful, relationship anybody could have. And she's like I'm not hearing her. And I hear words and they come into my head through my filters, and then I sort of process them through my programming, and it's very difficult. We're in a different place right now, and you said something that was true for me too. I'm on her side. I'm a big fan of her. I want her to have what she wants, with me or without me. And being in that place, it was sort of easier to understand that, change is always happening, whether I'm awake to it or not.
Yeah, right on.
Divorce is it's the PhD course for breakups. I've done the associate degree or whatever, and that was devastating. I gone through years of my life, which I know that you will not suffer. just with no real plan or sense of myself as separate from the person that was letting me go. And, you know, I know that I've been learning and growing and becoming, as you will continue to.
And that's what we can control, right? I wanted to fix it. Like I saw this as, you know, the great man, the great provider, the fixer of problems, right? And you know, that was me not listening again.
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't being asked to fix it.
So
Well, and I'm not saying women don't have some of this, but I got to tell you, I'm just thinking about two different people in my office this last week. It's like, as men, man, that's a big one for us. That it comes in many forms, but that fixing thing, that you know, I can remember. I gave this example to a client of mine. I said, I can remember when I was trying to get my head around that and was working in therapy to do that. And I remember Dee Dee on a couple of occasions saying to me, "Hey, thanks a lot I really appreciate that conversation we had yesterday." And I would go, in my head, I would go, what conversation? We didn't have a conversation. It's like, you know, and what she was talking about, she was thanking me for listening. She was thanking me for shutting up, you know, but she didn't, she was fine. She didn't think I was absent. She perceived me as present, and I was going, it was just such a shock that I didn't have to do something, you know.
if emotional sobriety isn't happy or isn't necessarily happy, and I know we've been unpacking this in different ways over the course of this hour, but what do we offer? What is the thing that we're building towards?
Freedom, Patrick, freedom.
It's always freedom. Yeah.
It's always
Let me,
freedom.
before we finish, I wrote
Freedom.
I wrote something just the other day that in one of my daily reader things. I would love to read. It's kind of a definition of emotional sobriety. Is it okay if I read this?
Yeah, of course.
I wasn't asking your permission. Why would I ask that question?
I don't know.
It's
You're
like
gonna read it anyway. You're gonna read it anyway. Damn it.
Alan goes no, and I go, oh, fuck it. It's
Yeah,
like,
he's
okay,
gonna
here
read it anyway.
it's in my handwriting, so I'm going to have to try to read my handwriting. It simply says, emotional sobriety is a philosophy to be applied, not a goal to be reached. Emotional sobriety is a daily practice that requires our conscious attention to details of how we are responding, both interpersonally and intrapersonally, to the world we inhabit. Happiness is not the goal of emotional sobriety practice, but it is a very prevalent side effect of living congruently with one's own consciously defined value system.
Right on. Right on. It's good.
Yeah. You have to, the last part of that is something I talk to people about a lot too. If you're going to be living congruent with your value system, you have to take the time to actually understand what your value system is.
That's it.
Deeper, not just don't kill somebody for no good reason, but it's like the deeper stuff. And that changes depending on where we are in our lives.
But you're right. See, a lot of this is grounded in the kind of relationship we have with ourselves, Tom. And for us to be,
man, it's where it starts.
Clear on some of who we are and what's going on. That's part of, I can even say that right now, is that this is another level of clarity about who I am and what's going on and what are the forces that have been, you know, driving my life for a long time.
Right.
And now there's a chance. The good news here is I really see a possibility of freeing myself from some of these ghosts that are rattling their chains.
Yeah. I thought when you were talking about your 11-year-old self when your dad died, you know, and one of the things you said the different level, I was just thinking, because I thought at the time, I said, you know, my own head, I was talking to you saying, Alan, don't make the mistake of thinking like some people do sometimes, is like, oh, I thought I had dealt with that, but I haven't. But it's like, no, I've watched you deal. I've heard you talk about dealing with it. I've watched you deal with it. It's like, no, it's just another layer. It's a deeper layer of it. And that's what you mean. I tell me if this is true. I think that's what you mean when you say this is not about going backwards. It's always about going forward. And a lot of times going forward means painfully going deeper.
That's right. Well, that's the experience I have. And that's what I was saying before. It's so funny to feel so awake but I was awake at one level of consciousness.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that
Yes,
there's
yes.
other levels of consciousness that I can't wake up to.
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
what I'm doing. And like, look, trust me, man, I didn't volunteer for this, right?
Mhm.
No.
I'm being kicked and dragged there, but at the same time, I'm really seeing that there can be a great value if I really keep my feet pressed to this fire.
Right. And you will, and you have support to do it. And it's like,
Oh,
that's
well, that's the other thing, Tom. I'll tell you, even Joe, I reached out to Joe, Patrick. You guys have just been stellar in terms of being my friend and being there for me at a time when I really needed it. So I really appreciate that. And
we love you.
And I feel that from my clients that I've shared. I don't share it with everyone, but now anybody that's listening to this that's I work with knows. And then and that's fine. I'm okay with that. That's how I live my life today, right? It's like I want to be an open book. I don't want to be ashamed of any of this, right? I'm not wrong. I'm just becoming. That's what my new line is.
I love that part.
I'm not wrong. I'm just becoming, man. I'm unfolding, and that's a beautiful thing, right? That's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Well, it was this was much needed, for me. I think people are going to be happy to hear from all of you. And Joe, when I got your email just asking about the podcast and whether you could pop in, I always feel so. I mean, whenever I see your email pop up, that's I get a little endorphin rush. So I'm happy that you reached out and insisted that we get the band together.
Well, it's like Sally. I feel like Sally feels with Joe. Joe likes us. Joe really likes us.
yeah, same here.
I do.
So when I get back to PA, I'll reach out to you, and then we'll solve it.
That's right. Or anytime in between. It's
Okay,
just time zones, man.
from
Just time zones.
All
Tom,
right.
I want to reach out and figure out a time we can get on the phone together for a while.
Good.
Okay. Well, until next time, and you guys stay safe out there.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.